My name is Reverend Karen Hutt, and I'm Vice President of Student Formation and Community Engagement here at United Theological Seminary. Welcome to Thursday Chapel. Today's service is rooted in the humanist tradition. The humanist view of life is progressive and optimistic. We also are in awe of human potential and evolution, living without fear of supernatural judgment. We seek to find purpose and meaning in this life alone. And now, a fellow humanist student and MAL candidate will provide our reading.
Hello, my name is Malia. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a humanist student in the MAL for Social Transformation program. I'm going to be reading to you the 10 Commandments of Humanism by the American Humanist Association. Altruism. I will help others in need without hoping for rewards. Critical thinking. I will practice good judgment by asking questions and thinking for myself. Empathy. I will consider other people's thoughts, feelings, and experiences. Environmentalism. I will take care of the earth and the life on it. Ethics. I will always focus on becoming a better person. Global awareness. I will be a good neighbor to the people who share the earth with me and help make the world a better place for everyone. Humility. I will be aware of my strengths and weaknesses and appreciate the strengths and weaknesses of others. Peace and social justice. I will help people solve problems and handle disagreements in ways that are fair for everyone. Responsibility. I will be a good person, even when no one is looking, and act responsibly at all times. Service and participation. I will help my community and play my part in making things better for everyone.
Thank you for reading those 10 commitments from the American Humanist Association. And now from the Great Pacific Northwest, UTS student Kyle Turver will sing Union Prayer by Billy Bragg.
I hear that prayer and praying will change this world around. I fold my hands and I bow my head and I kneel down on the ground. I prayed and prayed by night and day, and then I prayed some more. I prayed till my tongue was dry as dust, and I prayed till my knees had sores. Will prayer change shacks to decent homes? Will prayer change sickness into health? Will prayer change hate to works of love? Will prayer give me my right to vote? Will prayer give jobs at honest pay? Will prayer bring stomach full of food? Will prayer make rich treat poor folks right? Will prayer take out the Ku Klux Klan? Will prayer cut down the hoodlum bands? Will prayer stop in the Lynchburg hands. If all these things my prayers can do, I'll pray till I am black and blue. I'll pray till I'm 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 black and blue. If prayer can bring us union love, I'll pray and pray and pray some more. I'll pray all day from door to door and fall at night to pray some more. My prayer with the union label, my prayer with the union label, my prayer with the union label, my prayer with the union label.
All right, thank you, Kyle, and thank you, Billy Bragg, for creating such an amazing song. They said it would be a very short drive to my relative's house because we would take a shortcut through Cabbagetown, just outside of Atlanta. As I looked out of my window searching for cabbages along the highway, I saw long houses on sandy red clay. I saw an old mill and lots of old cars on the lawn with people standing around with kids playing in the dirt. This was the first time that I had laid eyes on these people, and my curiosity kept my head pressed against the window of the back seat. It was late, and my dad was finishing up work in his office in downtown Philadelphia. And a man came up to him on Broad Street with tousled blonde hair and asked if he could spare some change. I was stunned that my father reached in the pocket and gave this man his spare change that I had been begging for just hours before. I wondered, as this man walked away, why was he a beggar? My great-grandfather liked to tell stories. One day he was telling us a story about something and he looked to all the adults in the room and he says, well, you know, they ain't nothing but poor white trash. And everybody fell out laughing. I started laughing too, but I wasn't sure what I was laughing at until many, many, many years later in South Boston. There I was working with at-risk white youth in public housing. One afternoon, I went to the home of one of the kids who was struggling, and Mom directed me as I entered the house to sit down, and I look down and I see I am about to descend onto the whole front seat of a Mustang that was serving as a couch. I sat down carefully as if I was traveling in a foreign country, not sure of what the social cues would be in this strange place. These were the people I brushed up against, drove by, and heard about. These were the other white people, not the Jews I went to Hebrew school with, not the professional colleagues of my family. These were the white people that I and everyone around me grew up having nothing but complete disdain for. They were the butt of our jokes as we watched the Beverly Hillbillies and Hee Haw. Later, that all morphed into Honey Boo Boo and Duck Dynasty, and these images became pop culture junk food for me and my friends as we sipped craft beer at art openings. These were the one group of people that my family and friends of all backgrounds could agree that we were better than. Now, according to Nancy Eisenberg, the author of White Trash, the untold 400-year history of class in America, my attitudes about this population have been carefully curated by the deliberate myths of noble Puritans, bronze statues, and the delusion that America is a classless society. With the help of my professor, Howard Zinn, in college, these fantasies and falsehoods about America's bootstrap options for white people over time gave way to the truth that this is truly a class-bound society. In White Trash, Eisenberg takes a very particular look at class in the United States, examining the white outcasts whom politicians from Andrew Jackson to Donald Trump have sought to rally, but who otherwise had remained vilified, shunned, targeted, and kept apart, both physically in poorhouses and trailer parks, and also psychologically through eugenic science and discriminatory public policy. In the nation's cultural imagination, they have inspired mockery, kitsch, and unceasing grimaces and eye rolling. Now, clearly, while some Europeans did cross the Atlantic in search of religious freedom and political freedom, and that all can be debated greatly, many more came as convicts, prostitutes, orphans, and indentured servants. In fact, in 1619, that pivotal year, King James I was so fed up with all these vagrant boys milling about his brand new marketplace that he asked the Virginia Company to ship them overseas, just round them up and get them out of England. The poet, John Donne, who many of us revere, he wrote about the colony of Virginia as it were England's spleen or liver, draining the ill humors of the body to breed good blood. Colonial America was a place where the surplus poor of Europe, the waste people they were called of England, could be converted into economic assets. England's most destitute city dwellers were sent here, including children shipped to the colonies in a practice known as spiriting, creating a class of white laborers that served as disposable property, including one Elizabeth Little Bass Armstrong, sent to Virginia at 7 years old for stealing 2 spoons. These so-called founding fathers had very little faith in the capacity of the poor white man. Benjamin Franklin opposed giving alms to the unemployed poor, fearing it would encourage them to be idle. Thomas Jefferson urged the creation of a uniquely American stock of hardworking, virtuous citizens and thought that those who did not measure up were like livestock, and he compared them that they were unfit for breeding. Poor white people were seen as expendable, deserving of scorn. They were called waste people, off-scourers, lubbers, bog tratters, rascals, rubbish, squatters, crackers, clay eaters, tackies, mudsills, scallywags, briar hoppers, hillbillies, low-downers, white niggers, degenerates, white trash, rednecks, trailer trash, and swamp people. Now, this book, White Trash, is a cringe-worthy tome. It is a big history lesson, a chronology of a caste system that has existed in our country since the first Europeans arrived on these eastern shores some 500 years ago. Second, this book is an effort to explain why some white people seem hopelessly relegated to a lower rung on the economic ladder, a position that has much to do with cultural heritage as it does to do with financial and educational resources. Finally, the book is really a cautionary tale about how poor white people are manipulated systematically and purposefully to be excluded from full participation in society. Poor white people are reminded every day in this country that Wall Street, Silicon Valley, Hollywood, and Washington, D.C. can get along just fine without them. And Mitch McConnell and Jeff Bezos are uninterested and unwilling to improve their well-being. Meanwhile, their wages remain stagnant. Their kids' education is subpar. Their water is polluted. Moms drink too much, and dads are dying of a new disease that the Center of Disease Control has designated deaths of despair. Deaths of despair from opiates and suicide. Now, while I received a really good re-education reading this book, there were a few questions that kept me up at night I wanted to share with you. The first one was, why was I, this Black upper middle class person, educated, never been poor, very advantaged, why was I so interested in poor white people? Was it the gaze at Cabbagetown and the stories of my great-grandfather and the car seat couches and that made me a voyeur, peeking into the windows of white poverty to understand why these white people couldn't seemingly take advantage of reaping the fruits of being white in America? Was that why? With every new fact, however, I had a strange schizophrenic compassion for these people who were victims of the same system and ideology that exploited Black people. In fact, when I read that there was a movement to sterilize poor white women in the 1930s and serious academic attempts, I mean conferences and journals, to classify poor white people for a significant period of time, for 15 years, the attempt was to classify poor white people as a separate race. I sort of smiled, dreaming that if more people knew this history, maybe it could spark that multiracial poor people's movement, because poor people's suffering is connected through oppressive policies and twisted beliefs. But friends, that smile quickly dissipated and gave way to my lived experiences of those angry white poor faces. And one angry white face in particular, those of you old enough to remember that face of a very vicious 15-year-old girl standing behind another 15-year-old girl in Little Rock, Arkansas, during the desegregation days, screaming to the top of her lungs. Her face became the sort of the poster child for this kind of anger. I wanted to know who this person was. So I did a little research and I found out that that white woman's name was Hazel Bryant, who in 1958 would drop out of school, marry and live in a trailer. Her father was a disabled veteran, unable to work. Her mother held a job at Westinghouse plant part-time. Neither of her parents had finished high school. Hazel was the popular face of Southern white poverty, ignorant, unrepentant, and cruel. But the real story behind Hazel Bryant is that white elites rigged the system so poor whites got slightly better schools, slightly better jobs, and slightly better homes than Black people. And they were expected to defend that slightly betterness, those slightly better privileges, against people of color, often violently. Poor whites ended up with the short end of the stick regardless, but they fought in the knowledge that they were least better off than their Black counterparts who got nothing. President Johnson said famously that you can take the poorest white man and tell him he is better than the Negro, all while picking his pockets. I soon realized that my fascination with poor white people came from my early affiliations with more radical Unitarian Universalists in Boston as member of the Communist Party USA, the Student Mobilization Committee, and a member of the Socialist Workers' Party. For I had a sincere and passionate desire to see a multiracial revolution develop in this country that would wake and shake these white folks to join me and seek justice for all citizens. The second question that kept me up was, why am I so unsatisfied with conversations that I have with woke white religious liberals when I bring up poor white people? Usually I get strange, curious looks, as if these white people undergoing the travail of disenfranchisement deserve little empathy or consideration. their inherent worth and dignity not recognized. I have heard many, many religious liberals refer to poor white people as layabouts, drenched in self-pity, or describe them as a sad case consumed with racial status animus and anxiety towards non-whites, passing them on the economic ladder. Now, while some of this may be true, these comments by my white, faith-filled, justice-seeking siblings are strikingly ungenerous, callous, and even cruel towards a huge number of fellow Americans. Religious liberals like being allies to people of color. Some are armchair allies that watch Rachel Maddow and listen to Amy Goodman and quote all kinds of statistics. Some are cocktail party allies that like to one-up their progressive wokeness, comparing protest logs and financial contributions. And of course, there are those who go full in their allyship and immerse themselves in another culture to gain a deeper understanding and empathy for the struggle of people of color by moving into Black neighborhoods to gentrify them through their tacit demands for goat cheese or better coffee at the local bodega. Friends, can we reconcile the rhetoric of religious inclusivity and openness with the reality of self-serving and selective alliances? Can we empathize with the poor and working class, particularly the ones suffering from what Marx called alienation? As spiritual leaders in the formation process, what will you do to bridge these divides in your own communities? How class avoidant are you spiritually and socially? Do you see social justice through the lens of charity for the others or engagement with your poor white siblings? Friends, we can all do better. I know there's certain things I'll never say again after certain experiences I had in Southie back in the early 80s when busing was taking place in Boston. Siblings, we can transform and evolve. We can get unstuck and we can reframe our positions to extend our belief in the inherent worth and dignity to those poor white people we have never considered worthy enough to speak with or spend time with. When I sat on that car couch in South Boston, I realized how far my denomination, the Unitarian Universalist headquarters, was from Beacon Hill. It's just a couple of miles. But it was so far away from these people's realities and theirs from the other. The scope of the world for those in Southie was limited because of deliberate policies that kept them out of sight from the Boston Brahmins. But because a caring relationship brought me into this home, a caring relationship about a kid that mom and dad and I loved deeply and wanted to succeed, I had to force myself to stop connecting the sociological and political dots of their existence. I leaned into the caring relationship with this family in Southie by listening to their stories, eating with them, and sharing a family laugh with folks that were stereotyped as too racist, too stupid, too whatever to engage across race and class. When do you stop connecting the dots of demographics and lean into authentic relationships? Friends, as I prepare to sit down, you know, Black preachers always say that and go on for more, but seriously, equality is simultaneously the greatest accomplishment and the worst failure of America. It is the place where idealism and reality come to blows in American culture. Despite the glossy veneer of liberalism, which has been painted over the rust and the corrosion of centuries of racism and classism, the enduring American necessity for the social other is the challenge for spiritual leadership. I want to remind us that the many philosophical and theological and worldview constructs in this school, all of them have one thing in common. We all believe that we want to have a vision to begin the world anew again. And this must be with all kinds of people, not just our social circle that we create with like-minded folks. It must be practiced in an ever-intentional widening circle, in a manner of this circle that's real, that's a container for all of our faiths to be truly transformational. But it requires us to be honest and open about our biases. As we enter this critical juncture in our country, we need to forget charity and embrace a new form of solidarity to be transformational. Our resistance as spiritual leaders must include our own transformation, both internally and externally. Our resistance needs to resist everything about the current ruling class, especially their exclusivity. As we challenge the Trumpian values of indifference, we can't cherry pick which people to include and empathize with. Call them white trash or rubbish or rednecks or townies or hillbillies, or call them Gary. Call them Gary from Ohio, who dropped out of college because he couldn't afford it, who's taking remedial reading classes, but he was frustrated by those. His career choice of warehouse worker for Amazon or bartender or busboy or retail clerk, it's not really a choice, is it? He is our neighbor, our brother, our fellow citizen, and his inability to make a decent living in his small town in Minnesota or Wisconsin is due to circumstances and attitudes and policies far outside his control that were set in motion hundreds of years ago. And that changed very much. So as you prepare to block or delete that relative that you cannot reason with, think about beginning the world anew by giving your values, your principles, your theology, your philosophy, your worldview. Give those sources a muscular and compassionate workout for the sake of our democratic republic before it's too late. It's up to you, white America in particular, to reach out to your own people. We need you. Amen and ashe. And as we end today, I know we've all spent lots of time on Zoom, and sometimes our bodies get a little bit limited or crickly. So if you can stand and join me in this final video where we are going to maybe move our bodies in an expression of possibility. Move our bodies in an expression of possibility with a song written in 1971 by Marvin Gaye that asks a simple question: what's going on? He says we have to find a way to bring some love in here today. He pleaded with us, talk to me so we can see what's going on. And in this video, I want you to look what happens when headphones connect the entire world and we ask that question: what's going on? As you leave this place today, walk with your passion in front of you. Be girded up on the right side by the challenges before you, and on the left side with love. And be pushed forward to build the world, to build the beloved community, to build the world anew again. Blessed be and good afternoon.